The rain hammered against the cobblestone streets of Millbrook Heights like angry fists, each drop carrying the weight of 1,000 sorrows. Thunder rolled across the sky, drowning out the distant hum of traffic from the city below. In the exclusive neighborhood where mansions stood like silent sentinels behind wrought iron gates, the storm seemed to wash away all traces of warmth and safety. Celeste Hawthorne pressed herself deeper into the alcove of an ornate fountain. Her white wedding dress clinging to her trembling body like a second skin, as the delicate lace that had once made her feel like a princess now felt like chains, heavy with rainwater and the weight of her shattered dreams. Her dark auburn hair, which had been carefully styled just hours ago, now hung in wet tangles around her pale face. She clutched a small clutch purse against her chest, the only thing she had managed to grab before fleeing the church. Inside were her grandmother's pearl earrings, a crumpled $20 bill, and a phone with a dead battery. Everything else belonged to Vincent, or so he had made sure to remind her countless times. The engagement ring that had once sparkled on her finger now lay somewhere on the church floor, abandoned in her desperate escape. The memory of Vincent's face when she had whispered, "I cannot do this," at the altar still burned in her mind. His charming smile had vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous that she had seen glimpses of during their 2-year engagement. The way his fingers had tightened around her wrist when she tried to step back. The barely controlled fury in his voice when he hissed her name. She had known in that moment that if she stayed, if she went through with the ceremony, she would never truly be free again. So she had run now. Hours later, she sat shivering in the rain with nowhere to go. Her friends had all been carefully selected by Vincent, people who would never question his version of events. Her family lived 3 states away, and even if she could reach them, Vincent's influence extended far beyond the city limits. He had made sure she understood that. A flash of lightning illuminated the street, followed by a rumble of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Celeste closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing, but panic clawed at her chest like a living thing. What if Vincent found her? What if he was already looking? She knew he would not let her go easily. Men like Vincent Blackwood did not accept defeat, especially not public humiliation. The sound of a car engine cut through the storm, growing louder as it approached. Celeste's eyes snapped open, her heart hammering against her ribs. A sleek, black sedan moved slowly down the street, its headlights cutting through the rain like searching beacons. She pressed herself further back into the shadows, holding her breath as the car passed by without stopping. But then the brake lights flashed red, and the car came to a halt. Terror flooded through her veins as she watched the driver's door open. A tall figure emerged, moving with purpose despite the storm. For a moment, she thought it might be one of Vincent's men, sent to drag her back to face his wrath. But as the figure approached, she realized this man was different. He was tall and lean, wearing a dark wool coat that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hair was black as midnight, slightly mussed from the rain, and his face held an angular elegance that spoke of good breeding and quiet confidence. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark brown and filled with genuine concern, rather than the cold calculation she had grown accustomed to seeing in Vincent's gaze. Dr. Sebastian Cross had been driving home from the hospital after a particularly difficult surgery when he spotted the figure huddled by the fountain. At first, he had thought his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. Who would be sitting outside in weather like this? But as he slowed his car and looked more carefully, he realized it was a woman in what appeared to be a wedding dress. He parked the car and stepped out into the storm, immediately feeling the rain soak through his coat. As he approached the fountain, he could see her more clearly now. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with delicate features and frightened eyes that reminded him of a wounded animal. Her wedding dress was muddy and torn, and she was shivering so violently he worried she might be going into shock. "Miss," he called out, keeping his voice gentle and non-threatening. "Are you all right?" Celeste looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, she shook her head frantically and tried to make herself smaller, as if she could disappear entirely into the stone alcove. Sebastian's medical training kicked in immediately, could see the signs of trauma and exposure, and he knew that if he did not act quickly, this woman could be in serious danger. But he also recognized the fear in her eyes, the way she flinched when he moved closer. Someone had hurt her, and recently. "My name is Sebastian," he said, crouching down. So he was at her eye level, rather than looming over her. "I am a doctor. You are not safe out here in this storm. Will you let me help you?" The word doctor seemed to penetrate through her panic. Celeste had always trusted medical professionals, perhaps because they had taken an oath to do no harm. She studied his face in the dim light from the street lamps, searching for any sign of deception or threat. But all she saw was kindness and genuine concern. "I do not have anywhere to go," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. Sebastian felt something twist in his chest at the broken sound of her voice. "You do now," he said simply. "Come with me." He stood and held out his hand, palm up, letting her choose whether to take it. For a long moment, Celeste stared at his outstretched hand as if it were both salvation and potential doom. She had trusted Vincent once, had believed his promises of love and protection. But something about Sebastian felt different. Maybe it was the way he waited patiently without pressuring her, or the genuine warmth in his eyes, despite the cold rain. Slowly, she reached out and placed her small, cold hand in his much larger, warmer one. Sebastian helped her to her feet, immediately noticing how she swayed slightly from cold and exhaustion. Without hesitation, he shrugged out of his wool coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The coat was far too big for her small frame, but it was warm and dry, and she pulled it gratefully around herself. "My car is just over there," he said, gesturing toward the sedan. "I live nearby. You can get warm and dry, and then we can figure out what to do next." As they walked toward the car, Sebastian kept a careful eye on the woman beside him. She moved like someone who was used to being watched, constantly glancing over her shoulder and flinching at every sound. When he opened the passenger door for her, she hesitated again, and he could see the internal battle playing out on her face. "I promise you are safe with me," he said quietly. "I swear on my medical oath." Something in his tone convinced her. Celeste slid into the passenger seat, immediately grateful for the warmth of the heated leather and the shelter from the storm. Sebastian closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his movements deliberate and calm. As they drove through the winding streets of Millbrook Heights, Celeste found herself studying her rescuer from the corner of her eye. His hands on the steering wheel were steady and sure, with long fingers that she imagined were skilled at their work. There was a quiet confidence about him that was completely different from Vincent's loud, dominating presence. "What is your name?" Sebastian asked softly, not wanting to startle her. "Celeste," she replied, her voice still barely above a whisper. "That is a beautiful name," he said, glancing at her with a small smile. "Celeste, I want you to know that you do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to share. But I also want you to know that whatever brought you to that fountain tonight, you are not alone anymore." Tears began to fall down her cheeks, mixing with the rainwater that still clung to her skin. It had been so long since someone had spoken to her with such genuine kindness, without expecting anything in return. She nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. Sebastian's mansion appeared before them like something out of a fairy tale, all stone and elegant architecture with warm lights glowing in the windows. As they pulled into the circular driveway, Celeste felt a new wave of nervousness wash over her. She had grown up in modest circumstances, and even Vincent's wealth had never felt quite this overwhelming. "It is just a house," Sebastian said, as if reading her thoughts, "a rather large and empty house. If I am being honest, I think it could use some life in it." He parked the car and came around to open her door again, offering his hand to help her out. This time, she took it without hesitation. Allowing him to guide her up the stone steps to the front door, the interior of the mansion was warm and welcoming. Decorated in rich earth tones with comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than merely for show, a fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Let me get you something warm to drink," Sebastian said, leading her toward the living room. "Coffee, tea? Hot chocolate? Tea, please?" Celeste managed, her voice growing slightly stronger now that she was out of the storm. As Sebastian moved toward the kitchen, Celeste found herself alone in the beautiful room. She stood near the fireplace, letting the warmth seep into her bones as she tried to process everything that had happened. Just hours ago, she had been walking down the aisle toward what she thought was her future. Now she was standing in a stranger's home, wearing his coat, accepting his kindness. She pulled the coat tighter around herself, breathing in the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the faint smell of antiseptic that marked him as a medical professional. For the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. When Sebastian returned with 2 steaming mugs of tea, he found her staring into the fire with a thoughtful expression. She looked less frightened. Now, though, he could still see the tension in her shoulders. "Here," he said, offering her one of the mugs. Their fingers brushed briefly as she took it, and he noticed how cold her hands still were despite the warmth of the room. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the gradually diminishing storm outside. Sebastian did not push her to talk, understanding instinctively that she needed time to feel safe before she could share whatever had brought her to his doorstep. "Thank you, Celeste," said finally, her voice clear for the first time that evening. "I do not know why you stopped, but thank you." Sebastian looked at her over the rim of his mug, his dark eyes serious. "Everyone deserves help when they need it," he said simply. "And something tells me you have been needing it for a while." The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow, and fresh tears began to fall down her cheeks. But these tears were different from the ones she had shed in the storm. These were tears of relief, of recognition, finally being seen by someone who cared enough to stop. As the storm outside began to quiet, Celeste felt something inside her begin to calm as well. She was still afraid, still uncertain about what the future would hold. But for the first time in a very long time, she was not facing that uncertainty alone. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Sebastian's mansion, casting golden streaks across the hardwood floors. Celeste woke slowly on the plush sofa where she had spent the night, wrapped in a soft cashmere throw that Sebastian had brought her before retreating to his own room. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Panic began to rise in her chest until she remembered the kind doctor who had rescued her from the storm. She sat up carefully, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles from sleeping in her wedding dress. The white silk was wrinkled and stained, a stark reminder of everything she had left behind. The sound of quiet movement from the kitchen drew her attention, along with the rich aroma of coffee and something that smelled like fresh bread. Sebastian appeared in the doorway wearing dark jeans and a navy sweater, his hair still slightly damp from a shower. He carried a tray with coffee, fresh croissants, and what looked like homemade jam. "Good morning," he said softly, setting the tray on the coffee table. "I hope you slept well, considering the circumstances." Celeste pulled the throw tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look. "I did, thank you. Better than I have in months, actually." There was something in the way she said it that made Sebastian pause. He had spent years reading between the lines with patients, understanding what they could not always say directly. The relief in her voice spoke of nights spent in fear, of sleep that had been elusive long before last night. "I brought you some clothes," he said, gesturing toward a neat pile on the nearby armchair. "They belonged to my sister. She is about your size, I think." Les looked at the clothes with gratitude. A simple pair of jeans, a soft blue sweater, and what appeared to be fresh undergarments, all laid out with thoughtful care. "Your sister? Won't mind?" Shadow passed over Sebastian's face, quick but unmistakable. "She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. But she would have wanted them to help someone who needed them." "I am so sorry," Celeste said, her heart aching for this man who had shown her such kindness despite carrying his own grief. "Thank you," Sebastian replied simply. "She was a fighter right until the end. She would have liked you, I think." After Celeste had changed into the borrowed clothes and joined Sebastian for breakfast, she found herself relaxing in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. The jeans fit perfectly, and the sweater was the softest thing she had ever worn. For the first time in years, she felt like herself, rather than the carefully crafted image Vincent had demanded. "Can I ask what happened last night?" Sebastian said gently as they sat across from each other at his kitchen table. "You don't have to tell me everything, but if someone is looking for you, I should know what we might be dealing with." Celeste set down her coffee cup with trembling fingers. She had known this conversation was coming, but that did not make it any easier. "His name is Vincent Blackwood. We're supposed to be married yesterday." Sebastian's expression darkened slightly. He knew that name. Vincent Blackwood was a prominent businessman in the city, known for his charitable donations and political connections. But Sebastian had also heard whispers in certain circles, rumors about his treatment of women and his business practices. "What did he do to you?" Sebastian asked, his voice carefully controlled. The gentleness in his tone broke something. Open inside Celeste, and the words began to pour out. She told him about the gradual isolation from her friends and family. The way Vincent had slowly taken control of every aspect of her life. She spoke of the locked bank accounts, the constant surveillance, the threats disguised as loving concern. "Key," said if I ever tried to leave, he would make sure I had nothing, she whispered. Her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, as if it could anchor her. No job, no home, no family. Who would believe me over him? He has connections everywhere. Judges, police commissioners, newspaper editors. He made sure I knew exactly how powerless I was. Sebastian felt a cold rage building in his chest. The kind of anger that came from seeing someone precious being systematically destroyed. "Did he ever hurt you physically?" Celeste hesitated, then slowly rolled up the sleeve of her sweater. Sebastian's jaw tightened as he saw the fading bruises on her wrist, finger-shaped marks that told their own story. "That was from 2 weeks ago," she said quietly, "when I tried to visit my mother without telling him first. He said it was for my own protection, that I did not understand how dangerous the world could be for someone like me." Sebastian reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Celeste, what Vincent did to you, what he is still doing, it is not love, it is abuse, and you were incredibly brave to run." She looked up at him with eyes that held years of carefully buried hope. "But what do I do now? I have no money, no job, nowhere to go. Maybe he was right. Maybe I cannot survive without him." "That is exactly what he wanted you to believe," Sebastian said firmly. "But it is not true. You're stronger. Then you know and you have options. Just need to think them through carefully." Before Celeste could respond, the sound of Sebastian's phone ringing cut through the peaceful morning. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It was his colleague, Dr. Patricia Wells from the hospital. "Us. Sebastian, I am sorry to bother you on your day off," Patricia said when he answered, "but there is something strange happening here. A man came by the hospital this morning asking questions about you. He claimed to be from some kind of medical review board, but something felt off." "About him?" Sebastian's blood ran cold. "What kind of questions?" "Personal things. Where you live, your schedule, whether you had any female patients or visitors recently. Security escorted him out, but he seemed very interested in information about you." "Specifically?" "Thank you for letting me know, Patricia. If anyone else comes asking questions, please call me immediately." When Sebastian hung up, Celeste was looking at him with wide, frightened eyes. "It is him, is it not? Vincent found out you helped me?" Sebastian nodded grimly. "It seems so, but that means he does not know where you are yet. Only that someone helped you. We have time to figure this out." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Sebastian made discreet calls to colleagues and friends, trying to understand the extent of Vincent's reach and influence. What he learned was disturbing. Vincent Blackwood had connections throughout the city, from law enforcement to the media. But Sebastian also discovered something else. He was not the only one who had noticed Vincent's behavior. Dr. Patricia Wells called again around noon. "Sebastian, you need to know something. After I told Dr. Harrison about this morning's incident, he shared something with me. Apparently Vincent Blackwood's first wife died in a car accident 3 years ago. But there were questions about the circumstances that were never fully investigated." Sebastian felt his blood run cold. "What? What kind of questions?" "The kind that get buried when someone has enough money and influence," Patricia said quietly. "Careful, my friend. This man is more dangerous than he appears." When Sebastian shared this information with Celeste, she went very pale and sank into the nearest chair. "Rebecca," she whispered. "His first wife was named Rebecca. He told me she died in an accident, but he never liked to talk about it. Said it was too painful." "Celeste, I think you were right to run when you did," Sebastian said, kneeling beside her chair. "And I think we need to be very careful about our next steps." That afternoon, as if summoned by their conversation, Vincent Blackwood himself appeared. At Sebastian's front door, Celeste was upstairs when the doorbell rang, but she recognized the sound of his voice through the walls and immediately felt the familiar cold grip of terror around her heart. Sebastian opened the door to find a tall, impeccably dressed man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Vincent's smile was charming and practiced, the kind that had fooled countless people over the years. Dr. Krauss, I presume, Vincent said smoothly. I am Vincent Blackwood. I believe you may have encountered my fiancée last night. She has been under a great deal of stress lately, and I am very worried about her mental state. I am not sure what you are talking about, Sebastian replied evenly. Though every instinct he had was screaming danger, Vincent's smile never wavered. But something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Come now, doctor. I have security footage from 3 different cameras showing you picking up a woman in a wedding dress during last night's storm. A woman who looks remarkably like my dear Celeste. Sebastian felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his expression neutral. Even if that were true, I would not be at liberty to discuss it with you. Patient confidentiality, you understand? Ah, but she is not your patient, is she? Vincent stepped closer, and Sebastian could smell expensive cologne mixed with something. That reminded him unpleasantly of disinfectant. She is a confused young woman who has made some very poor decisions. I am here to take her home where she belongs. If she does not want to go, Vincent's laugh was soft and completely without humor. Dr. Cross, I think you may be misunderstanding the situation here. Celeste is not well. She has been struggling with some mental health issues lately, which is why yesterday's incident occurred. I have the documentation to prove it, should anyone ask. The threat was clear, even wrapped in Vincent's polite words. Sebastian realized, with growing alarm, that this man had probably been preparing for this possibility for some time. He would have medical records, witness statements, perhaps even recordings, all designed to paint Celeste as unstable and Vincent as the concerned fiancé trying to help her. I think this conversation is over, Sebastian said, starting to close the door. Vincent's hand shot out, stopping the door with surprising strength. Dr. Krauss, I would hate for there to be any misunderstandings between us. You have an excellent reputation at City General Hospital. It would be unfortunate if questions arose about your judgment, your professional conduct, perhaps even your medical license. The threat hung in the air between them like poison. Sebastian understood now exactly what Celeste had been up against. This was not just wealth and influence. This was a man who had turned intimidation and manipulation into an art form. Good day, Mr. Blackwood, Sebastian said firmly. Using his full height and presence to project calm authority despite the fear churning in his stomach, Vincent studied him for a long moment, then stepped back with that same cold smile. Give my regards to Celeste, Dr. Adrai. I'll be waiting for her at home. I always wait for the people I love. After Vincent left, Sebastian found Celeste huddled in the upstairs bedroom, tears streaming down her face. She had heard enough of the conversation to understand the gravity of their situation. He is going to destroy you because of me, she sobbed. This is exactly what he does. He ruins anyone who tries to help me. Sebastian sat beside her on the bed and pulled her into his arms, feeling her trembling against his chest. Celeste, listen to me. I am not going anywhere. We are going to figure this out together. You do not understand, she whispered against his shoulder. Killed Rebecca. I know he did. He will kill me too if I do not go back to him. Sebastian held her tighter, his mind already working through possibilities. He thought about his sister, about how helpless he had felt watching her fight a battle she could not win. But this was different. This was a battle they could win, if they were smart about it. Then we make sure he cannot hurt you, Sebastian said quietly. But we are going to need help. Detective Rosa Martinez had seen enough domestic violence cases to recognize the signs immediately. When Dr. Sebastian Cross called her that evening, she listened carefully to his story about Celeste and Vincent Blackwood. Rosa had been investigating Vincent peripherally for months, following a trail of suspicious incidents involving women who had mysteriously disappeared from his life. Dr. Cross, I want you to know that you and Miss Hawthorne are not alone in this, Rosa said, as she sat in Sebastian's living room later that night. She was a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Celeste at ease. We have been building a case against Mr. Blackwood for some time, but we needed someone brave enough to come forward. Celeste sat, curled up next to Sebastian on the sofa, wearing one of his sweaters that was far too big for her. She had stopped trembling, but her hand remained firmly clasped in his. What about his connections? Celeste asked quietly. His friends everywhere. Judges, police commissioners, politicians. Rosa smiled grimly. He does. but he also has enemies. People who have been waiting for the right moment to see him brought down. And Dr. Cross here has some connections of his own. Sebastian's mansion became the center of a carefully orchestrated operation. Rosa brought in federal agents who specialized in cases involving wealthy, well-connected criminals. They installed security systems and assigned protective details. Most importantly, they helped Celeste document everything Vincent had done to her over the past 2 years. Sebastian watched in amazement as Celeste transformed from the terrified woman he had found in the storm into someone determined to fight back. She spent hours with prosecutors, detailing every incident of abuse, every threat, every method Vincent had used to control her. Her voice grew stronger with each telling of her story. "I want to do something," she said to Sebastian one evening as they sat by the fireplace. "All these people are helping me, risking themselves for me. I need to do more than just hide." "Do you have in mind?" Sebastian asked, though he suspected he already knew. "I want to wear a wire. I want to get him to confess." Sebastian felt his heart clench with fear. "Celeste, that is incredibly dangerous. If he suspects anything, if he realizes you are recording him, then we make sure he does not suspect," she said firmly. "Rosa thinks it could work. He's arrogant enough to believe he has already won. He will want to gloat, to explain exactly how helpless I am." The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Celeste would agree to meet Vincent at a restaurant, somewhere public, but with enough privacy for him to speak freely. She would be wearing a sophisticated recording device, and backup would be positioned throughout the location. The night before the meeting, Sebastian found himself unable to sleep. He stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the city lights, and thinking about how much his life had changed in just 1 week. A week ago, he had been a successful but lonely surgeon, going through the motions of a carefully ordered existence. Now he was deeply, irrevocably in love with a woman who was about to put herself in terrible danger. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Celeste stood in the hallway, wearing one of his t-shirts and a pair of borrowed pajama pants, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I could not sleep either," she said softly. Sebastian opened his arms, and she walked into them without hesitation. They had been growing closer each day, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. "I am terrified," she whispered against his chest. "So am I," he admitted, stroking her hair. "But I believe in you. Are the strongest person I have ever met." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Sebastian, if something happens tomorrow, I need you to know that, meeting you, having you believe in me, it changed everything. For the first time in years, I remember who I used to be." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away. "The tears that had begun to fall, nothing is going to happen to you. I will not let it." When he kissed her, it was with all the tenderness and promise he could not put into words. She kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring all of her hope and love and trust into that connection between them. They made love that night with a gentle passion that spoke of new beginnings and deep trust. Sebastian worshipped her body. With careful hands, erasing the memory of rougher touches with his tenderness, Celeste discovered what it felt like to be truly cherished, to give herself freely to someone who saw her as precious rather than possession. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in his bed, her head on his chest as he traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I love you." "I love you too," he replied, tightening his arms around her, "and tomorrow is going to be the beginning of our real life together." The restaurant Vincent had chosen was exactly what Celeste had expected: expensive, exclusive, and dimly lit. He was already seated at a corner table when she arrived. Looking every inch the successful businessman in his perfectly tailored suit, his smile when he saw her was triumphant and cold. "Celeste, darling," he said, standing to pull out her chair with exaggerated chivalry, "you look well. Rested. I trust Dr. Cross has been taking good care of you." "Vincent," she replied evenly, taking her seat and immediately feeling the familiar chill of his presence. "I have to say, I am impressed," Vincent continued, settling back into his chair with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. "This little rebellion of yours showed more spirit than I gave you credit for. But it is time to come home now. I have missed you." Celeste forced herself to remain calm, remembering Rosa's coaching. Let him talk. Let his arrogance work against him. I'm not coming home, Vincent, she said quietly. His smile never wavered. But she saw the familiar, dangerous glitter in his eyes. But you are, darling. You see, I've had some very interesting conversations with people this week. Dr. Krause, for instance, is going to find his medical license under review very soon. Something about inappropriate conduct with a patient. Very serious allegations. Was never his patient. Details Vincent waved dismissively. The point is, anyone who tries to help you will find their life becoming very difficult very quickly, just like Rebecca found out. Celeste felt her blood turn to ice, but she forced herself to keep her expression neutral. What about Rebecca? Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. Poor Rebecca thought she could leave me too. She actually filed for divorce. Can you believe that? What? She thought her little videos and recordings would protect her. He laughed softly. It is amazing how quickly evidence can disappear when you know the right people. And it is tragic how easily accidents can happen to people who do not know when to stop fighting. The recording device hidden in her jewelry was capturing every word. But Celeste felt sick with the casual way he spoke about murdering his wife. But you learned from her mistake, did you not, darling? Vincent continued. You are smarter than Rebecca was. You know that there is no escape for me. There never was. You are wrong, Celeste said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. Vincent's eyes narrowed. Am I? Let me explain something to you, Celeste. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Cross is going to receive some very disturbing news about his career. By afternoon, he will be facing criminal charges. By evening, he will understand exactly what happens to people who interfere with my property. I am not your property. Vincent reached across the table and grabbed her wrist with crushing force, his mask of civility finally slipping. You are whatever I say you are. If you do not come home with me right now, your precious doctor is going to end up just like... Rebecca, do I make myself clear? Perfectly clear, said Detective Rosa Martinez, appearing beside their table with her badge clearly visible. Vincent Blackwood. You are under arrest for the murder of Rebecca Blackwood and the attempted murder of Celeste Hawthorne. The restaurant erupted in controlled chaos as federal agents moved in from their positions throughout the dining room. Vincent's face went white as he realized he had been trapped, that his own arrogance had finally betrayed him. This will not stick, he snarled as Rosa cuffed him. I have lawyers, connections, influence. Had Rosa corrected him, past tense. Turns out when people hear you confessing to murder on a recording, they tend to distance themselves pretty quickly. 6 months later, Celeste stood in the garden of Sebastian's mansion wearing a simple white dress that bore no resemblance to the elaborate gown she had worn the night they met. This dress was her choice, bought with money from her new job as a graphic designer. Worn for a man who loved her exactly as she was, Vincent Blackwood was serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. The recording had been the key piece of evidence that broke his carefully constructed empire of intimidation and corruption. One by one, his victims had found the courage to come forward, and the full scope of his crimes had been revealed. Are you ready? Sebastian asked, offering her his arm as they prepared to walk down the aisle together. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended only by the people who truly mattered. Rosa was there, along with Dr. Patricia Wells and a small group of Sebastians. Colleagues from the hospital. Celeste's mother and sister had flown in from across the country. Tears of joy streaming down their faces as they watched her marry the man who had saved her life in every way that mattered. I am ready, Celeste said, looking up at the man who had taught her what real love looked like, as they exchanged vows in the golden afternoon sunlight. Promising to cherish and protect each other for all the days of their lives, Celeste thought. About the terrified woman who had huddled in the rain that stormy night 6 months ago? She had been so lost then, so convinced that she was powerless and alone. Now she knew better. She had found her strength, her voice, and her freedom. But most importantly, she had found love that was built on respect and trust rather than control and fear. When Sebastian kissed her as his wife, sealing their promise to face whatever the future might bring together, Celeste felt nothing but joy and hope. The storm that had brought them together was long past. Ahead lay only sunshine and the endless possibility of new beginnings. Their love story had begun with him finding her in her darkest moment and saying, "Come with me." Now, as they started their new life together, she knew that wherever they went from here, They would go together, as equals, as partners. As two people who had found in each other everything they had ever hoped love could be. Story. Conclusion. In the years that followed, Sebastian and Celeste built a life filled with purpose and joy. Sebastian continued his work as a neurosurgeon, while Celeste established her own successful design firm. Together, they created a foundation to help other victims of domestic violence, providing not just shelter and legal aid, but also the kind of emotional support that had been so crucial to Celeste's healing. They had two children, a daughter and a son, who grew up knowing that love was supposed to feel safe and joyful, never frightening or controlling. The mansion that had once felt too big and empty became a home filled with laughter and warmth sometimes. So on stormy nights, Sebastian and Celeste would stand by their bedroom window and remember the night that changed everything. The night when a desperate woman in a wedding dress found sanctuary with a lonely doctor who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply being willing to say, "Come with me," and mean it with your whole heart. Their story became a testament to the truth that it is never too late to start over, never too late to find real love, and never too late to discover that you are stronger and more worthy of happiness than you ever dared to believe.